The wind whipped through the campus of Winslow University as Emma Larson tightened her scarf and trudged across the quad, clutching her books against her chest. The crisp autumn air had always been her favorite, but lately, an unease had settled over her that even the beauty of the golden leaves couldn't dispel. It all began 2 months ago when she started Professor Richard Kane's literature seminar. At first, she had been excited about the class. Professor Kane was renowned for his brilliance and passion for romantic poetry, and his eccentric teaching style made every lecture unforgettable. He had a way of making even the most reluctant students fall in love with Keats and Shelley. Emma had been no exception, eagerly participating in discussions and earning his praise for her insightful analyses. But soon, his attention became too much. It started innocently enough. After class one day, he lingered as she packed her things, striking up a conversation about her essay. She'd thought nothing of it at the time, flattered by his interest in her work. But the following week, he'd begun leaving little notes on her assignments. "Brilliant observation, Emma," or "Your perspective is a breath of fresh air." Harmless, she told herself. Just a professor encouraging a promising student. Then came the lunches. At first, he appeared at the cafe by coincidence, waving enthusiastically as he approached her table. "Mind if I join you?" he'd ask, already pulling out a chair. He insisted on paying, despite her protests, and regaled her with stories about his travels, academic triumphs. It was awkward, but she didn't want to be rude. The coincidences became more frequent. No matter where she chose to eat, Professor Kane seemed to appear, always insisting on paying for her meal. When she tried eating at odd hours or choosing out-of-the-way spots, he still managed to find her. It must be fate, he'd joke with a crooked smile that no longer felt charming. Her unease deepened one Friday evening. Emma's roommate, Lisa, had left for the weekend to visit family, leaving Emma alone in their dorm. She'd planned a quiet night of studying, but a knock at the door shattered the silence. Frowning, she opened it, only to find Professor Kane standing there, a bottle of wine in one hand and a stack of poetry books in the other. "Professor?" she stammered, her heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" "I thought we could discuss that Byron essay you've been working on," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I brought some references that might inspire you." Emma's throat went dry. "You can't just show up at my dorm," she said, backing away. "It's inappropriate." He frowned, a hurt expression crossing his face. "I'm only trying to help you reach your potential, Emma. You're special? Surely you see that?" Her stomach churned as she gestured toward the door. "You need to leave." For a moment, he didn't move, his gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Then, with a sigh, he set the books on her desk and walked out, leaving her trembling in the doorway. From that night on, Emma's life became a waking nightmare. She caught glimpses of Professor Kane watching her from across the quad, his eyes following her every move. He began sending her emails at all hours, filled with cryptic poetry and declarations of admiration. When she stopped attending his lectures, he emailed her again, pleading for her to return and promising that she'd be safe with him. The breaking point came one evening in study hall. Emma had chosen a secluded corner to work on her history paper, hoping for a few hours of peace. The room was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of papers and the hum of fluorescent lights. She was so engrossed in her work that she didn't notice him until he was standing beside her. "Emma," he whispered, his voice startling her so badly she nearly knocked over her coffee. She looked up, her heart racing. "What are you doing here? I needed to see you," he said, his eyes glassy with desperation. "You've been avoiding me." "Because you're making me uncomfortable," she snapped, gathering her things. "This has to stop." Before she could leave, his hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "Wait," he pleaded. "You don't understand. I care about you, Emma, more than I should." Panic surged through her as she yanked her arm free. "Stay away from me," she hissed, her voice trembling. She bolted for the door, not daring to look back. That night, Emma made the hardest decision of her life. She couldn't stay at Winslow. The fear that had taken root in her chest was suffocating. and she knew it wouldn't fade as long as Professor Kane was near. With her parents' support, she contacted the administration and filed a formal complaint. Then she packed her things and transferred to a university in another state. Months later, Emma sat in a sunny cafe on her new campus, finally beginning to feel like herself again. The nightmares had lessened, and she was making friends in her classes. Still, she couldn't shake the lingering unease that came with knowing someone had crossed so many boundaries to try to insert themselves into her life. As she sipped her coffee, a man walked past the window, his head bent as he checked his phone. For a moment, her heart stopped, convinced it was him. But when he looked up, she saw it was just a stranger. Letting out a shaky breath, she reminded herself that she was safe now. Professor Kane was a chapter of her life she'd closed for good, or so she hoped.